Hey everyone, it's a beautiful day here in Omaha. We had a really little bit of snow yesterday. I woke up in the morning and I opened up my blinds and I was like, oh, shocked. I was not expecting snow, but of course, in the weather it was forecast because we've been really lucky this year with the really nice weather. Today is supposed to get up to like 60 degrees. Tomorrow, I think it could play pretty close to 65 or something. So yeah, it's really been nice. Um, Thanks for watching my last video on investing for beginners. A lot of you kind of messaged me about, hey, this is not applicable to me. And yes, you're right that I should have been more specific about that. Video was only for folks in the United States. Um, I bet there's similar things, 401k, HSA in your country, but I have no idea about it. So that video was specific to um, 401k, but the gist of the video was, hey, start investing, right? And that's applicable, doesn't matter where you live in the world. Today's video is more about um, I started thinking about what would be a beneficial second video and keeping that theme of the finances and talking about investment. I kind of came up with like, hey, what I have seen throughout my friends and reading here and there, like what are the ways you can kind of ruin your finances, right? Either if it's a credit card debt or student loan debt or living way above means, there is a way like you can do all kind of investing and be very diligent about it. But if you get into a lot of debt, get into spending a lot of money, then it can kind of set you backwards. So I have roughly here 11 items that I think is applicable to uh, folks around me. Of course, there's like a lot of other ways you can ruin your finances, right? You can go to a casino and bet all the money you have in your saving accounts, and if you win, you double it, or you lose it all. So there are other ways, but I'm kind of talking about only things that I see that you're doing it. Um, and another thing I want to kind of bring it up is like it's not like, hey, number one is really bad versus number 10 is really bad or number 11 is really bad. It's all of them. If you do in moderation, you're fine. All of them, if you go crazy, then yeah, it's gonna set you backwards. All right, first item on my list is taking interest in your finances way too late. There's a popular saying in investment, and I don't know who is the source of this quote. The best time to start investing was yesterday, and the second best time is today. So the folks who start in their 20s and their 30s are always going to be ahead of the folks who started kind of later down in their career, in 40s or maybe. And even the folks who start investing or getting into finance early in their 20s are ahead of the folks who just started getting in their 30s. Um, and the reason is compound interest, right? If you put, let's say, $1,000 start a month in your 20s, that's 12,000 a month, and then that's 120,000 from your 20 to being 30, and that's only the money you put in there. Now, if that takes a 7% growth or something, it's going to be, I have to do really the math, but I'm thinking it's going to be more than 120 for sure, right? It's going to be around like 300, 400,000 if it grows at 7%. Versus somebody who's starting 30s, he's starting at zero, right? He doesn't have any investment. So he's already behind, already 200, 300,000, whatever that comes to be is already behind. So I suggest like, hey, if you haven't thought about it, start today. But if you do, good job. You're already ahead of the curve. Um, Second thing that I see is, and this is especially for the teenagers or high schoolers going into a really popular college, popular university for their bachelor's or master's, um, and they don't have any scholarship. They take out the student loan, and by the time they graduate, they're already 100,000 into debt, into student loan debt. Um, I highly recommend, if you are somebody who's thinking about going to college, find a college that is going to give you scholarship, and scholarship, I mean, that should be your goal. At the end of the day, when you get out of that college, it should be more of a, hey, where do I stand? Do I only have $10,000 in debt or $100,000 student loan debt? Don't go to a college just because your bunch of friends are going and it's popular. Go because the education is good, and go because once you get out of there, get a degree out of there, you have a less debt. Now, of course, this is not applicable if your parents are paying for it, right? Then go wherever you want to go or wherever their finances can afford. But this is for the folks who are going to be most likely paying out of their pocket for college expense, for pay for that student loan. Um, Student loan. Number three on my list is, and again, this is for anybody buying things to impress other people. This goes with the theme of like spending way above your means. I know a lot of people that do things because either their friend group is doing, or they were trying to impress people. Maybe that's getting a fancy car. When they can only afford a Honda, they want to buy a Tesla or BMW, right? Or maybe like, hey, taking fancy vacation 4 or 5 times a year when they could only afford one. I've seen a lot of people like who are making $50,000, but they're spending like they earn $100,000. So having this kind of attitude to our finances is definitely gonna set you backwards, because number four on my list is having significant credit card debt. And if you're living way above your means, you have to fund it some way. And for most of you, it's a credit card debt. You are applying for those credit cards and then just putting your spend on the credit card, and you already have a low enough salary. You are living way above your means, so you're not paying full your credit card, and you're accumulating. Credit card company charges you 20 to 30%. I don't know, depending on what interest environment we are. But that 20 to 30%, if you don't pay more than the minimum payment, or if you're not paying the full balance every month, that interest is going to rake up. So, for example, let's say you put $500. You really wanted some kind of, let's say Apple Watch. I don't even know how much Apple Watch costs, but let's say for the sake of the argument, $500. You put it in a credit card debt, and you are only making a minimum payment. Let's say your company charges 20%. If you just make a minimum payment, it might take you more than a year or 13, 14 months just to pay that $500, right? And by the time you pay off that balance, you have paid more than $100 or $200 just for the interest. Um, so think about it when you are buying things, when you are spending money. Think about how much you earn, what you can afford. You don't do things just because your friend groups are doing. Be really diligent about what are your means, right? I recommend, especially early in your career when you're not making that much money, limit. You don't go around and do things. In this culture of Instagram, social media, you see folks your age spending money, going to Mexico 4 or 5 times a year, or going to Europe 4 or 5 times a year. And definitely, when I was that age, I wanted to do that, but I knew like, hey, I couldn't afford it, right? It's gonna put me like, I can spend $2,000 going to Mexico or going to Europe, but it's gonna take me a year just to pay that down $2,000. So maybe I'll just go to Colorado, and spend $500. So think about it. Of course, experiences are important, but at the same time, don't go way above your means to just have those experiences. Number six on my list is staying in the first or second job too long. I see a lot of folks early in their career staying in a job too long and kind of complaining about, oh, their salary is only so much, right? Early in your career, you should be job hopping, either getting promotion within your current company, or job hopping, I say, every 2 years. The reason is, if you stay in a current company and don't get any promotion, will get you 10 to 15% or even 20% raises, right? If a job hop, it's around the same number, 15 to 20%. But if you stay in the same company with the same role, they're only going to give you 3 to 4% raises. So if you kind of like, I say 2 year, like see if you are getting promoted or just job hop. And this is only applicable like early in your career. Don't do this when you're like 10 year in your career. You probably want to stay, want to stay in that role, or maybe your work-life balances and things like that matter. But definitely early in your career, I would say like either stay 2 years in your career and see if you can get promotion, or just move up, move to a different company. Number seven, let's say you're doing all other things, and for some reason you are just investing. You know a lot about investing, but you're making risky bets, right? Um, so I think of a stock market as kind of legalized gambling, where it doesn't feel like you are gambling. You're going to a casino and putting your money and betting on something, but at the same time, within the investment, within the stock environment, you can buy something called like penny stocks, right? Thinking like, oh, it's gonna go up. It's gonna go from like 1 cent to like $1. If you put thousand, if you buy 1,000 shares, all of a sudden your your $100 investment becomes 1,000 or something, right? So making risky bets. What I suggest, like early in your career, when you have a lot, I suggest, what's your appetite? Like everybody's risk appetite is same. So for me, like my 90% of my money is in some sort of like mutual fund or ETF, whereas 10% of the money, like I like to kind of play around with it, right? I might buy a penny stock, I might do forex trading, I might buy options. So same thing. When I say like the 10% of money, though that 10% of money, I'm fine if I lose it, right? So for somebody, if you have 100,000 in your portfolio, that could be a $10,000 where you kind of do those risky bets. That 10,000 can end up making you 100,000, or you're fine losing that 10,000. However, if you are someone who your total portfolio is $1,000, I don't recommend putting all 1,000 into some risky bets and losing it all. So be very mindful of what kind of investment options you are making. And a good example is this week, right? I was like, oh, I want to buy this Costco call options and Neo put a stock like before. So they had an earning call this week, so I was expecting after the earning call, the stock is gonna go up, and I can kind of redeem my $800 options, can become over $3,000 to $4,000, and that was the case on the both of those until the earnings happened, and they missed their earnings, and now like my $800 option was right before earnings, like I think it went up to like 3-4 thousand, and I was like, okay, it's gonna go up, right? No, and right now it's like $200. If I sell it today, it's $200. Same thing with the Neo put option, where I was betting like, hey, it's gonna go down, but for some reason it went down immediately, and I should have sold it then. And I only invested $100 because I was fine. Like, hey, if that goes to zero, I'm fine with it. And that's what ended up being happened. That $100 was, I think, at a time where I was thinking about selling it, it came about to be like $300, but I didn't sell it, and now it's worthless. It's $0. So think about it. That if that $100 was 1,000, I'm losing 100,000, 1,000 immediately. If that was, I was betting 10,000, it's going to a zero immediately. So think about it. Don't do risky bets. Of course, risky bets sometime will pay you off, but at the same time, you can lose it all too. Number 8 on my list is not enough having enough savings, at least not having enough savings. I recommend to have see what are your expenses, right? Rent plus groceries plus utilities, and maybe you like to go once a week to a restaurant or like to go eat out. Add those up, see how much you spend in a month, and try to have at least 6 times that. So have at least worth of 6 months of savings saved up. Um, and I'm not saying like, hey, right early in your career you can do that, right? Early in your career, you just like kind of getting by. You probably are not making that much money unless you get that high tech job, right? High paying job for, but that's not the case for most of the scenario. Most of the people that are getting somewhere 60 to 80K, maybe 100K, like very early in their career, depending on what kind of degree they have or what kind of job do they have. And a lot of people not even getting that. They're starting out in 40K. When I started, I think I started in mid 40s, mid 40s. So during that time, of course, you can't really save much, but at least try something, right? At least try to have like save even $100 a month or $200 a month, right? And get to that point where you have at least three to ideal would be 6 months of savings. But if not, whatever you can save. Um, the reason is, I mean, in this atmosphere, not all the companies, you ever kind of heard every week, every month, you hear about layoffs, you hear about this, and not even layoffs. A lot of people like make bad decisions, or something happens, right? Um, there's a large expense all out of sudden, and you just don't have that money, and that can really put you backwards. So I recommend people at least having 6 months of savings. Um, 6 months of savings, and then put that savings not just in your saving account, but right now you can put in a high yield savings account or somewhere, or some type in like mutual funds or something, right? So where if you need it, it's accessible. It's like pretty much like a cash. You can go to a bank and just take it out. So think about that. Try to add at least 6 months, and then for some people, and again, this is like some people are fine with just 3 months of saving. That's their risk appetite, right? And then some people are not okay with 6 months. They really want to have 12 months of saving, and that's fine with you. Think about where you are comfortable, and then have at least saved up at least that amount of money. Um, Number 9 on my list is living your money in saving account rather than in some sort of brokerage or ETFs or stock. Now, that tip is not applicable at this environment, at this interest rate environment. The high yield saving accounts is giving 4.5% right now, or in some cases 5%, right? So you could leave the money in the saving account and be fine with it. But usually that's not the case. When the interest rate, we are federal fund rates were to zero, none of there were banks were not giving you 4% interest. They were giving you like 0.1. Maybe if you put it in a CD, CDs, like they might give you like 0.5%, but no, not really. So I recommend like put your money in ETFs or mutual funds. And then don't pick a risky. I mean, within mutual funds, there's so much. You can just pick a broad, like total market index fund and Um, put in there instead of just having your saving accounts and it's not earning any money. Like your $10,000, if in a bad interest rate environment or a interest rate environment where we were at in the past 2 to 3 years ago or years ago, if you put 10,000 and left in your saving accounts, at the end of a year, it still be 10,000, maybe 10,000 and $10, you know. Whereas if you had put it in like mutual fund or something, that 10,000 could have been like 12 or 13,000, depending on what interest rate you got. So think about it. And again, same thing in here. Some people are really comfortable like putting some sort of money in a savings account, just having that access, and not putting all in the mutual fund. So think about it. You know, it could be like, hey, 10,000 savings. You have that 6 months of saving. You can do 60-40, 50-50, 90-10, whatever is your risk appetite, and it just depends on um, what your risk appetite is. Number 10. Now, number 10 is you can do all other things right. If, but if you do this kind of like wrong, it'll kind of set you backwards. And number 10 is not dating financially smarter or savvy people. And when I say dating, I mean um, not marrying or something. So you could do everything right, right? But if your partner doesn't do anything of those, oh, it's gonna set you behind. I've seen a lot. I would say like most of your um, fights or argument within marriages are because of money, and unfortunately, right, money is not money can buy you happiness, but money can buy you things that will lead to your happiness, right? Maybe that's a vacation, or like buying something, right? Um, and that's a it's a bitter truth. That's the world we live in. Um, so you did everything right. You don't have credit card debt. You don't have student loan debt. You are living slightly below your means, right? You're taking those vacations, but you're not going crazy. You're spending your money, right, and something that makes you happy, but you're not going over way above your means. But if only you are doing that and your partner is not doing that, that's gonna set you backward. So think about it. When you are choosing that partner, do you guys align? Does your value align in terms of finances? That should be the one of the talks you should be having as you guys are thinking about the future. Number 11 in the list. Now you can have a perfect partner, right? You can do all other things right. But if you don't do this thing right, it's going to put you really in backwards. And that is not putting your health first. Um, Putting your health first, not doing regular exercises or keeping up to date. Right now you're young, you think you can do anything. You have bad habits, right? Drinking a lot, maybe, or is that not exercising, right? And maybe in your 20s or 30s, you don't see it. But once you get to like that mid 30s and mid 40s, you can kind of see all the things you did really all the things you did in your 20s, and now you're having consequences, right? So I highly recommend like put your health first. If you don't have a good health, you are not going to earn good money. Or the money you spend is going all into medical debt or something. So definitely definitely you can do everything right, but if you don't put your health first, it's gonna really set you behind. um, I hope you guys like the list that I made here. And of course, there's not only like I talked about like 11 things here today, but there are a bunch of other things that you can do that can ruin your finances or put behind. You can kind of do your own research. Folks have done it, or from your own experience, right? You did something and we're like, oh, dude, I wish I had not spent that money doing that. Otherwise, I would have been like $1,000 richer or something. So think through, learn from your experience, learn from your mistakes, and move forward.